Good afternoon. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I invite you to join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Roll call.
Gary.
Here.
Pepcorn. Preston.
Here.
Strand.
Here.
Mahoney.
Here. We have two items on the agenda today, the mask mandate discussion. What happened is a variety of people didn't realize it actually expires tomorrow, and there was a lot of discussion that came up at the Board of Health. At that time, they made a recommendation to us as a commission. And our president kind of approached me and said, maybe we should re-talk about this since we got a lot of input of emails over the weekend. In fact, John said you're a little bit overwhelmed sending notes back to people because it's a lot of emails. And I was unable to respond to everybody's because I got a lot of emails. But I'll let Preston, you want to start it out and have a discussion, kind of what things we're thinking about now that it's come to a point where it would go off on the 18th.
Sure, sounds good. So we have a short PowerPoint presentation, and I'll give you a little warning, Chelsea. I'll ask you to come up and speak from the board perspective. So just to cover some of the rationale for doing this, and if you go to the next slide. Fargo Cass County Board of Health met last week, and we had a really good discussion about the mask mandate and what impact that has, not only for the city, but also for businesses and the school district. So Chelsea, would you mind coming up and just talking a little bit about the conclusion there and the recommendation?
Sure.
And I'm sorry, Chelsea Matter, she's the chair of the Board of Health.
Do I have to turn? Oh, no, it's on.
I'm sorry?
Sorry, I was just wondering if the mic was already turned on, so I'm good now. All right. Commissioner Preston is right. We had lots of great discussion at the Board of Health meeting last week and just talking about the impact of a mask mandate. It's a very simple and effective way of reducing the spread. It's been shown nationwide, and we've certainly seen an impact here in this community in terms of where active cases were. And then, mask mandate was implemented, and we saw a decline despite the holiday season where we know folks get together. So we thought, there's got to be some correlation between what we're doing in terms of the mask mandate and the decline in the active cases. And so there's a lot of stories out there that are coming about in terms of new variants that could pose a threat. And our healthcare workers are certainly overwhelmed. They're getting a little bit of a breather maybe right now, but, so many of them have been diverted to vaccinating our community. And we just can't afford another resurgence in terms of, active cases going back up, because that's pulling on the same resources. And so our request of you all is to extend that mask mandate so that we can ensure our healthcare workers can, keep going. We've been asking a lot of them over this whole pandemic, and our kids are in school, they're learning, we want to keep them there. And so, this is a simple and effective means of doing, something that can hopefully avoid kind of that resurgence as we move along here. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. I know I put some data in the letter, so just let me know if you have any questions.
Sure.
Or if you
We'll
have anything
continue
else.
on, and actually, I think the rest of the presentation really encapsulates what the board had talked about as well. So if you'd be available for questions afterward, that'd be great. Okay, next slide. So one of the concerns was schools are currently in session. We all recognize the importance of keeping schools going, both for the economic health as well as the kids' learning. So most teachers are still not vaccinated. So that gets to be a concern when we become a little bit loose or more loose in the community with masks. Next slide, please. So the CDC has, even with the decrease in the incidence across the country, they very clearly have stated that mask mandates should continue. Part of that is a concern about the new variants, and we actually have a report this morning from the North Dakota Department of Health where we have two, possibly a third case of the variant out of the United Kingdom. If you don't know, that's a more contagious type of variant, so that's a concern. Next slide, please. And then business community, actually, there were a couple of different surveys done. One was done by the Department of Health, and if you go to the next slide, you can see there the support for continuing a mask mandate is anywhere from 1 month to 4 months, and in 75% of the businesses were supporting 1 to 4 months. And then DCP also did a survey, and their results showed about 59% support for a mask mandate to be continued. Next slide. And then finally, our vaccination rates aren't where they need to be to really achieve herd immunity. We're at probably close to 20% only, and herd immunity is considered at about 70%. So with that, there's a recommendation, I guess, from the Board of Health to go for at least another 30 days. And actually, I would recommend that we put it on a particular date and that it correlates with the City Commission meeting next time, maybe.
Is that a motion?
Okay, I would make a motion to extend the mask mandate until March 22nd of this year.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Commissioner Garrett?
Yeah, to suggest that the mask mandate is the reason for the decline in number of cases isn't scientific. You said there must be some causation or some correlation. No one can prove that. The number of case totals are I'm not gonna call it a curve because it's not the curve. Our total number of cases follows exactly what South Dakota does. They don't have mandates. We do. How is that possible? It's the exact same one. Go look it up. The curve, the actual curve, there's only one curve, is the number of people in hospital beds and how many beds we have available. Our curve is very flat in Fargo and North Dakota. That's the stated reason for these mandates. So what's the stated reason now? The different variants? There's always going to be a reason, guys. So when did we win? When are we going to stop these things? The CDC came out and said that 2 masks is like 70% more effective. Let's mandate 2 masks. Let's mandate 3. If that's the science, let's do it. So I'll modify the motion. We require 2 masks. That's a motion.
What's your motion?
I want to require 2 masks.
Is there a second? Is there a second? Dies for lack of a second.
Okay, so if this is scientific, and that's why we're doing it, 2 masks is better than 1.
Any other discussion? Commissioner Strand?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm curious if Chelsea or anybody from the Board of Health, do you have a sense of color code correlation with at what point you would be really comfortable having us lift this, with the color code risk categories we see? I guess my other concern is the other side of that, is if these variants start exploding here and we start having, and I hope we don't, accelerated numbers, at what point do we decide to continue it for how long into the future? So at what point does it come off, and at what point would we be deciding that's compelling? I see both sides of this.
Chelsea?
Commissioner Strand, it's a good question. I'm think of it more in terms of vaccination rates, because I think the vaccination is certainly, an effective means to achieve what we're all trying to get to. I think, Commissioner Preston indicated 70% is what the public health experts are saying. It's hard to judge from a percentage standpoint if we're going to get to 70%. Those of us that work in healthcare know that influenza vaccination rates aren't 70%. And so it's hard to pick a rate, but I think it needs to be higher than 12.9%. And if folks are On the competitive side, Rolette County is beating us. They got 32.6% up in Rolette County. So just for those that are a little bit more on the competitive side, this is a good thing to compete on.
Mr. Chairman, if I could also
Commissioner
reply.
Preston.
I agree. It's the vaccination rate that we need to watch. And, I mean, if we could even get to 50%, knowing that there's a number of people that have been exposed to COVID already and have some built-in immunity, we don't know what that number is necessarily, that have not been immunized yet. But even if we could get to 50% and hoping we got 4,000 doses, I think this week, right? Desi, I see you're on virtual. So hopefully those numbers will start to climb a little bit faster. Desi, I don't know if you want to say something?
I'll just add into, I think the other thing we need to watch is just what the presence of active disease. So we're still having outbreaks in this community in sports teams, in Super Bowl parties and different things like that. So until those are like kind of really falling off the mark, I think that's another metric that we need to use. And yeah, this is a really big week for us for vaccinating. So we're very, very busy today. We have, I believe there's 1,600 scheduled for today. So our numbers are increasing. We're getting out vaccine as soon as we can. But this would be an important tool to keep with us for a bit.
Commissioner Strand.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just curious if I could call on Chief Zabolski to just give us an update on how this is going for the police department. I know we had an original recommendation / mandate, then we had a state mandate with enforcement, then we've had a month of our back to our original local mandate without quote-unquote enforcement, and that would be extending now. How is that working for your department, Chief?
Well, it's taking up a lot of resources, but we've continued to check the licensed premises. The observations there, almost everyone's in compliance, so we haven't really had any issues, but for one instance, just this last weekend, related to some other issues as well. But from a mask perspective, we haven't seen any issues.
Thank you.
Well, when the Board of Health came out with a recommendation, it was a different twist to what was going on because we were headed to expiration of this on the 18th. Since that time, I've received numerous emails, and a variety of the emails actually have come from people that either have had people sick or had a death in their family. There's a correlation that's out there that the mask usage decreases the death rate, and actually Cass County's death rate per 100,000 is 105. Minnesota comes in at 114, and South Dakota is at 208. South Dakota, he has had less masks throughout the community, but they do it in Sioux Falls. But there is still a difference in the two states in which they have 97 people still hospitalized, 221 active cases, 2,204 active cases, and 1,844 deaths compared to North Dakota's. We're down to 46 hospitalizations, 786 active cases, and 1,431 deaths. The important point is that in Cass County, we've been able to drive the death count down since we had a lot of people die in nursing homes early on in this disease, and now that's come back. We also have monoclonal therapy, which is available. Concur with the Board of Health that basically we do not have enough vaccine in the community at the present time. What we risk is death, and we have a variant in the community. And, you know, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, is always said in medicine. But if we go another month and see what happens to our rates, let's hope we continue at this low rate. We do risk jumping off of this into having things jump back up. And I think we all dislike the fall. The fall numbers just went crazy, and I don't think any of us would like that as a commission. So being conservative or being on the side of caution, I think the Board of Health has asked us to do that. I think as a commission, I respect that request, and we'll be in favor of this. Any other discussion? Roll call vote.
Preston,
Aye.
Strand,
Yes.
Gehrig,
No.
Mahoney,
Aye. Our second item on the agenda is a legislative question, and what happened is Eric has been offered to give an amendment, and I would like to know the feelings on this particular bill. I know Commissioner Garrick, you actually gave testimony on this bill, And what we're being offered now by Ben Koppelman is a possible solution to the issue, because there's unintended consequences of how the bill is presently written, and there may be an opportunity to fix it. But if we agree with the amendment, then as a city, we would no longer oppose. So I think it takes commission action to help Eric decide what to do in this.
Yes, well, you explained it quite well, Mayor. So I'll repeat a little bit what you said. The bottom line is House Bill 1248 has a couple of components to it. One is to add sort of dangerous weapons. That's not really what the topic of this discussion is today, but it is in there, so I'll just mention it, is to add dangerous weapons to what is already a restriction on a city's ability to create restrictions during a state of emergency. Currently under law, city can have a state of emergency, but it can't really restrict the possession of firearms. This amendment would add dangerous weapons to that, which is a long list of items. I provided a handout, which is that definition that would be included. But the real topic is what the mayor was describing. It's the second part of House Bill 1248. This bill was clearly proposed in order to address the city of Fargo's issue, where we certainly permit the sale of firearms in the city of Fargo. We permit it in commercial zoning districts, retail shops throughout the city certainly have firearm sales, but we do have home occupation laws that we're in a residential zoning district, that allows for residential living. But our home occupation law allows some level of commercial activity, and just to outline it, the so-called minor home occupation, which is permitted by right, as long as the occupation itself doesn't take up more than 25% of the floor space of the home, you have fewer than 4 customers per day, and fewer than 12 customers coming to the site per week, and you don't have employees coming to the site, then it's a minor home occupation. And the logic is kind of obvious. A lot of people could have a minor home occupation like that, and the neighbors wouldn't be terribly aware of it. It wouldn't be any greater activity than a normal residential living. That's the idea of home occupation. We do have a list of exceptions to the home occupation law. In other words, certain uses are prohibited, and that includes car repair, mortuary, boarding place for pets, and firearm sales. And of course, we all know what this issue is. We've had applications from individuals who want to sell or transfer or permit the transfer of firearms out of their home as a home occupation, and they're required to get a kind of a clear zoning permit in order to get their federal firearm permit to do that. So in any event, we have that particular provision. To our knowledge, City of Fargo is sort of the only city that has that kind of home occupation prohibition. This ordinance, by adding the word zoning ordinance or any other ordinance to what already exists, which is that a home rule city or a regular city may not enact an ordinance relating to purchase, sale, ownership, possession, transfer of firearms. Now we're adding dangerous weapons, of course, too, and ammunition, which is more restricted than state law, would be prohibited and void. So this adds zoning ordinance to get at that particular issue. The concern, as the mayor was saying, is that when you say any zoning law, the question is, what's a zoning law? I mean, zoning laws contemplate uses such as home occupation regulations and so forth, but it's also requiring retail sales to occur in a commercial zoning district. It's also dimensional standards, setbacks, and so forth, how much the building can occupy on the property. And one can make an argument here that this change would sort of throw the baby out with the bathwater. It would make an argument, at least, for someone who has a firearm retail establishment, something even more than a home occupation, to say, listen, your zoning laws just don't apply to me at all. And that would be, I think, an unintended consequence behind the bill as drafted. I don't think that was intended at all. And that's what Representative Koppelman is saying. I would like to propose an amendment to address that unintended consequence, to limit it accordingly. I haven't seen the draft language, but that's what the proposal is. But what he would like to see is, since the city of Fargo has been opposed to this bill, he would like to see the city withdraw its opposition if that amendment went through. It has not come out of the political subdivision committee yet, but I mean, I'm told that there's a reasonable likelihood it'll get a do pass recommendation, and that there's a likelihood, a possibility at least, if not a likelihood, it'll pass the House. And so then it would go over to the Senate, and that's the request, is if it goes over to the Senate, the city withdraw opposition.
Discussion?
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Preston?
So Eric, tell me any unintended consequences with the language of "or any other ordinance."
Yeah, I mean, that's just, any other ordinance that's intended to, I mean, just be a blanket intention in drafting it that way, say, I don't care what you call it, zoning ordinance, any other ordinance, any ordinance the city passes is going to be, can't restrict
So-
firearm sales.
So I'm not certain I understand how this solves the issue of perhaps extending into other kinds of city accountabilities, like you were talking code enforcement. And I understand that may not be, if there's some other ordinances that could be impacted here, and we have a lack of control of, say, the number of customers that come through or whatever.
Right. I mean, I think what the intended amendment would be to permit a city to regulate the number of customers that come to a home occupation, those kind of things that would be applicable to all home occupations. I think the amendment, again, I haven't seen the draft, but my understanding as represented to me is the proposed amendment would sort of say cities can still regulate zoning, regulate home occupations, and it just can't isolate the firearm sales, possession, and so forth as part of that regulation. I think
Okay.
that's the intention of the cure.
Go ahead.
One other thing, though, as I look at this, we still have the dangerous weapon issue with this bill. And I'm assuming, Chief Zabolski, do you want to address that? I'm assuming that's not something we want to see?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good point. Before Chief Zabelki gets up here, he wasn't in on the conversation I was in. I would think that this proposal we were talking about had to do with the zoning law. I'm not sure if that proposal, I mean, in other words, if you said we'd still be opposed to the dangerous weapons
Yeah.
item, that could be a different issue. I don't know, but you just have to give us some direction, and we'll have to negotiate it appropriately.
Well said, sir. Yes, I would. In terms of the dangerous weapon aspect of the bill, and it's kind of oddly put together that these two issues are on one bill because it puts us in a kind of precarious position. But the elimination of our ability to control dangerous weapons at public emergencies, things of that nature, would be a bad public safety outcome. The things that they have deleted from the definition, that are already in the definition, are things that are actual weapons. Clubs, throwing stars, nunchucks, things that are already prohibited because their sole purpose is that they're used as weapons. And then by inserting that into our inability to control that during these situations, I think we only need to look to our May 30th riot in terms of how many more weapons do we want out there, and we have no ability to control anything until things are out of control. So I think from that perspective, from a public safety opinion, we would oppose that portion.
Chief, when they had the Washington episode, did not many of the crowd have dangerous weapons other than what we consider a rifle?
I don't know if that information is out there. It looked to me, from my viewing of the video, that they used a lot of available resources, flagpoles, barricades, likely because they didn't have weapons. The change in this particular bill would allow them to come with weapons, making that even a more dangerous situation should they decide to become unruly. There's really no reason that I can think of that someone would need to carry billy clubs, throwing stars, nunchucks, and things of that nature while engaged in a peaceful protest.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion that we continue to oppose.
The question, okay, is there a second?
Second.
So one of the questions I would have of Eric, if the amendment comes in and you agree to the amendment, how should we broker that? When do you next have to speak to this?
Well, I'll probably get back to the League of Cities by the end of the day today.
Can you circulate to us the amendment to the commissioners when it comes in so we could see what he's suggesting?
I can, but you can't have any dialogue as a commission without, with an email exchange. So we'd have to have a special meeting. So I'd be looking for some authority. Recognize it puts you in a little bit of an awkward position, same with me, but just looking for a little bit of authority to address I think the zoning issue. Again, just to be clear, I'm not sure what Commissioner Preston meant by her motion, but I took it you're sort of standing on just opposing the whole thing.
Yes.
Without acknowledging any kind of a compromise. Okay.
And Commissioner Garrick, you testified in favor of the bill.
Yep.
Is it that you want people to be able to sell guns in their homes? Is that the
Yeah.
issue more of anything, federal license, those types of things? Or-
Yeah, that was gonna be my comment, and this is kind of a monster of our own creation. If we would have just followed state law in the first place, we wouldn't be here. So maybe that's a lesson for us to learn, and maybe we should just change our LDC. Maybe we should do the right thing and allow firearm sales to be in out of homes, because the clear reading of the current law is that we can't make any ordinance to deny that, right? And the point of this law was, or this new bill, was to add in or ordinances, because a law is an ordinance and ordinance is law. But we didn't read it that way. We tried to get around it. And by now the clarification being put in there, we've now put us in a situation where this might affect other things. So maybe if we just fix the problem that we created, this would just all go away. So I support this wholeheartedly because it teaches us a lesson to not try to get around state law.
Mr. Chairman, if I could.
Commissioner Preston?
So the intent was to actually address it, but to address it with all of the other exceptions in consideration as well. And that is our intent, to do that. But, I guess unless there's an amendment to remove all the references to dangerous weapons, it seems to me the bill is either up or down, and I would certainly oppose both sides, but certainly the dangerous weapons side.
Well, to be clear, the present commission did not pass the original ordinance on selling guns in homes.
Correct.
We only addressed that we would send it to LDC rewrite when we're
Yes.
rewriting it. So this commission hadn't made that bill, so when you say a lesson learned, the previous commission had put this in. And it is a little question about local control versus state control as well, Mr. Garrick. So I understand where you're coming from, but it also, sometimes when people make sausage, they make a bill that makes it more complex.
I agree.
Mr. Garrick?
And I brought this up over a year ago. So when you say that we didn't pass the LDC in 2002, whenever it went in, okay, but I brought the problem and I showed you guys, and you guys said, well, we hate guns, therefore we're gonna keep on doing what we're doing. Well, too bad. So now you got someone else coming in and putting their hands in our chili, and you don't like what he's doing with it. Well, lesson learned. Let's follow the law. And when we talk about local control, let's be clear about something. We have a lot of local control here. But when the state law says no city shall, then no city shall. That's how things work. The state supersedes the city. The federal government supersedes the state, right? So if we would just fix the problem that we have and let go of this idea that this is a gun bill. This is not about a gun bill, right? This is about letting people do business out of their home. And people have glommed onto this idea that it's about guns. It's not. It's about freedom to use your home the way you're supposed to, and about following state law, which we're not doing either one of those things, and it serves us right.
Eric, you want to say something? I'm sorry. And then
Yes,
John Strand.
if I may just provide some information in response to that, I think what Commissioner Garrick's referring to is the city attorney's opinion, my opinion back in 2015 or 16, I can't remember which year, followed up by an opinion we obtained from Green Espel this past year that interpreted the law as it existed, and both supported the idea that what this law meant didn't include restrictions on a city's ability to zone. There was an AG's request, and that was actually discussed during testimony on a slightly different bill, but the conversation spilled over from this bill. The representative from the Attorney General's office said when asked for an AG's opinion, to be honest, we agreed with the City of Fargo's city attorney's opinion. So they didn't give a formal opinion in response, but that was their testimony. So it is, no offense, I don't mean to disagree with the commissioner, but there's some disagreement as to what the state law means in its current form. I thought I'd put some context into this. Really, I think what I'm asking for your reaction to, guidance if you will, is the proposal that the city, if the amendment were introduced, would the city withdraw its opposition? It could be our response, we'll withdraw our opposition to the zoning part of it, but not to the dangerous weapons portion. That could be a guidance you might provide to me, and that would authorize me to at least move forward on that basis. I'm not suggesting you should do that, but I'm just saying, just to make a possibility clear to you.
Mr. Chairman, my intent
Mr. President.
is not to do that.
Okay.
You're opposing on both points, zoning and dangerous weapons. Commissioner Strand, did you agree with that in your second?
I have some questions, but separate from that, Mayor.
Okay.
First of all, I bristle when the legislature preempts local actions. You know, we have a local policy in place. We agreed to send this back for study at our land development code process, which is unfolding now. I think the proper thing for the state would be to respect Fargo's approach to this, because it is a local issue. And I have, which leads me some questions. If under this amendment, they're adding wording about zoning and other ordinances, does that suggest that our position now is legally defensible?
I'm sorry, say that.
Well, they're modifying, adding an amendment to say we can't do this through zoning or local ordinance, which suggests to me what we're doing now is
Yeah.
legally defensible.
So by introducing an amendment, is that an admission that we were right all along? I mean, all right, you can make that argument. I don't think a court would accept that argument. I think it's, they're just trying to make their intentions known even more clearly, is what I think they would say, in all fairness.
And what is their rationale for asking this be declared an emergency measure? What's the emergency here? Is it the emergency side of this ordinance, the dangerous weapons? What's the emergency?
I don't think that has been explained in testimony, but it very well could be that.
Lastly, Mayor, I'll finish. My recommendation would be that the city of Fargo, I think they're killing this bill by adding the amendment to it. I think they're setting it up to fail, which I'm okay with. I wouldn't be in favor of supporting it. If anything, at a minimum, I would suggest the legislature hoghouse it and send it for study.
Commissioner Strand, one of the other items was when we were having the demonstrations in Fargo, there was a question of whether you could carry a firearm into that area. And I think part of the dangerous weapons is trying to clarify that. I got a lot of phone calls said you can't regulate the firearms in the crowd. And that was the only duty they had. Now they've added these other things, and you remember the pictures of people carrying rifles into the area. Found out on an emergency declaration, can't necessarily do anything about somebody carrying a firearm. It's not within control of the emergency declaration. So I think that's what Complement's trying to change, to bring into other weapons. And the dangerous weapons, I agree with the chief, don't really want all those dangerous weapons in a crowd. But Commissioner Gary?
I think we might be looking at this from the wrong perspective, too. We're looking at the perspective of people in the crowd carrying weapons. What about business owners that happen to be in the middle of a crowd protecting their business or their home, right? You know, you have a business in downtown Fargo. This law would prevent you from standing outside your home with a firearm. That doesn't make any sense to me. So beyond just the scope of this makes a lot of sense to me, it also is nothing more than a clarification of what the current law already is. And I know Eric's position, he's given it, and the AG has refused to give their opinion on it. But it's very clear, if the plain reading of the law, the current law is, cities shall not prohibit gun sales or ammunition. That's the plain reading. So again, they're just trying to clarify because we cause a problem. We try to get around it by using the LDC instead of creating law. Well, it's the same thing. LDC is law, ordinance is law. So I think we might be looking at it from the wrong perspective. We shouldn't be looking at it if you're anti or pro-gun. That's not the point. We're trying to be in compliance with state law. And, you know, if this doesn't pass, we'll probably get sued if we don't change the LDC. And then, you know, putting this change, this small change that we could have done easily, into some study in the greater LDC discussion, well, it's going to be a year or two down the road. So in the meantime, we have people who can't do business in their homes because we have this silly law in the books. So again, I support it. I hope you guys do too. And this is not going to be the end of the battle if this doesn't pass. Something else is going to happen. It's probably going to be us being sued.
Any other discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Preston,
Aye.
Strand,
Yes.
Gary,
No.
Mahoney.
Aye. Any
Thank
other
you.
business on legislative issues, Eric? You have nothing else?
I have nothing else, no, thanks.
Okay. Any other business of the commission? Move to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.